What's up?
I completed Human Revolution again. 3 times.
Anybody ever told you that you're a masochist?
Well, there was the original Human Revolution without DLCs, the Wii U Director's Cut and the PC Director's Cut.
It's 2027. The game starts with a rendered cutscene featuring Bob Page and some other individuals. They talk about something we can't understand yet regarding her and Seraph Industries.
After the cutscene, we meet Adam Jensen and his girlfriend Megan Reed. They prepare to hold a big speech in Washington, which is supposed to revolutionize augmentations as a whole thanks to Patient X.
Adam Jensen. Almost not obvious after having a main character like Jesus Christ Denton!
You forgot Alex.
I didn't.
On the way to David Seraph, the boss of Seraph Industries, they meet Francis Pritchard, the head of the tech lab.
Just as Adam was meeting with David, the company is attacked and Adam is killed. Great game! 13 out of 37.
This is not the end though. David revives him and pumps him full of augmentations. A few months after that, Adam is reactivated as the head of security way before his recovery was complete.
We control and decide what Adam will do, whether he will become a mass murderer or a walking angel that still kills on occasion.
The story, as usual in Deus Ex games, falls out to be much more complex and hits many philosophical dilemmas that we all know and love. It involves secret organizations, conspiracies, etc.
As it is a prequel to the first Deus Ex game, it takes place during the roaring 2030s and we witness the golden age of human augmentation. The problem is just that the human revolution never really happens during this game.
Well, you're kind of right. I mean, we hear about it, we somewhat see it, but we don't experience it. It's too bad, really. Just imagine being inside the revolution, among the masses, deciding which side you support. The game even teases you with it, as you answer a few dialogues and how you feel to have been forcibly augmented against your will. It's a shame.
Also a shame are the...
Do we even have to mention it? The endings are bad, again. It seems that Deus Ex never manages to hold the intense storytelling till the very end.
This game has, depending on how you handle the final area, a 4-button choice, and you don't see the actual results of any ending.
The endings of Human Revolution are still better than the first game.
How so?
Human Revolution throws several philosophical questions at you that leave you thinking and also comments on your playstyle throughout your adventure. But all the endings are still saying, and then they all played the first game again, the end. It's ironic, but Invisible War had the weakest story and the best ending so far.
If you say so. Speaking of weak story, I hate how limited you are in approaching the story in this game.
While I enjoyed the flexible but still linear storytelling and especially the boss mechanics of the first game compared to this one, I really don't mind it here as the story itself is still very strong. You can play this game without and with previous knowledge. Both have special moments. I speak from experience, as I have first played Human Revolution in 2011, then played the original Deus Ex in 2016 and replayed Human Revolution in 2016 as well.
Care to prove it?
They will.
Gentlemen, how wonderful to see you both. Go right in, Adam. He's waiting.
This is the newest and encrypted GPL trackers, if you know. It transmits data to our dedicated satellites every 10 feet.
I don't care what it takes. I want you, Darrow, in Washington, by my side.
Also, the story has many cringeworthy moments before the bosses are fought. Besides, why can't we skip bosses by killing them before the fight happens or by having ways to avoid them? That would have been so much better.
All in all though, this game has a strong story that ties in with the first game. There are weird moments and wasted opportunities in the story, but it had me hooked up until the very end.
Except if you play the director's cut, which forces you to go through the DLC, The Missing Link.
I consider the DLC to be a mixed bag. For one, it has one of the most interesting areas in the entire game. It offers a ton of ways to navigate through the level that rivals the likes of the first Deus Ex, and has crucial plot details that are needed to understand the otherwise confusing final boss of the game. What holds it back are the design choices they made. We have forced backtracking and robbing the player of his equipment and skills. I wouldn't see that as a big problem if it weren't for two things. Unless you get the very maximum of experience points in the DLC itself, you'll end up with less skill points than you had before, and there is a bug with bigger weapons, like the laser gun. Finding ammunition for the laser gun, which is probably the most powerful weapon in the game, is almost impossible. I had a full magazine in my laser gun, and while I got my backup ammo back at the end of the mission, the majority of the ammo was inside the gun. The mission removes all ammo inside the gun, which annoyed me to no end.
The mission just takes a really long time, and I think it goes on for a few hours too long. I was bored very quickly, and it really feels out of place in the grand narrative. It would probably have been better to leave it as an extra mission.
I'm not too sure about that, as it has the aforementioned information needed to understand what is happening for the final boss. But being shorter and better designed for the director's cut would have been appreciated. Leaving it as an optional mission would have probably been the best solution.
For people who don't know, the director's cut is the definitive version of Deus Ex: Human Revolution, which includes the DLC called The Missing Link and features additional items and weapons.
I don't have to say it, but if you want to play Human Revolution, get the director's cut. I'll go into the minor differences later, because first, why don't we tell you about the actual game? It's a first-person shooter that can be played guns blazing or purely by stealth. Both ways offer enough to look forward to.
The stealth approach is a bit limited though, as there are, in my opinion, sometimes not enough ways to reach your objectives or ways to complete a mission. The running and gunning part would have also benefited from different types of ammunition and a deeper skill system.
While you are right that the sneaking is a bit more limited here than in the original game, I don't think that it's a big negative, as the level design still offers a ton of ways, thanks to different skills that affect the level design. Having optional ammunition and the likes wouldn't be bad, but we are still set 30 years before the original Deus
So
Ex.
that's why there's plasma rifles and laser guns.
And I think they work just fine.
The new skill system doesn't have the RPG elements of the first game.
At least this time, I can think of the protagonist as a highly trained badass who can hit shit with guns. The skill system is not entirely gone though, as it has been integrated into the augmentation system. Or is it the other way around?
You get so-called praxis points once you level up or find praxis kits. These are used to unlock new augmentations. The in-game explanation is that to compensate for the deep mental trauma of Jensen, his augmentations slowly unlock one after another in order to give his brain time to adjust.
This system overall works pretty great in my opinion. I prefer it to the original Deus Ex. Of course, some abilities are still literally useless. One in particular even more so than toxic resistance in the first game. There are some which could have been so much more. But then we have things like electricity immunity or double takedowns.
The game doesn't have melee combat, so to speak, but instead it has context-sensitive attacks. I do like the combat of the first game, but this one isn't so bad.
They're going to know where you are.
It works. There's also a new cover system, and for the most part, it works fine too, with the exception of a few times.
Human Revolution is like a modern FPS shooter that combines elements of a third-person shooter and Thief 3. I personally like it a lot, but just like the first game, I love the different approaches you can take, even though there's always one best path to take.
Also, the hacking is much better this time around, as you don't just wait around, but actively hack with a little mini-game. Even though some of the layouts are questionable.
Fortunately, these bad layouts appear very rarely. The developers also handled it smartly when it comes to rewarding your approach. First off, playing it stealthy is always rewarded with much more money, secrets and experience points, but stealth requires lots more praxis points than running and gunning. Running and gunning works because the level design makes it possible to reach the end without having augmentations at all. making it possible to exclusively focus on combat abilities.
Though taking out guards or activating manual abilities in general, like lifting heavy objects, always requires energy. In the original release, Jensen had one battery that recharges over time. The 4 optional batteries wouldn't recharge though.
The director's cut has 2 always replenishing batteries, which makes the game much more comfortable to play and allows you to always use all abilities. Though even with the energy restriction in place, there are 2 abilities that, if combined, are just way too overpowered. I'm talking about cloaking and silence. They eat energy like hell, but you effectively avoid every enemy that way.
The AI is much smarter than in the previous games, which is not hard to do. They are somewhat smart for the most time, like if they think they spotted someone, they call for comrades to make a search, but other times, they are just dumb as bricks.
I have to say though, if you play a barbaric playstyle, then this AI will challenge you, trust me. Until you know how to abuse it, but that depends on your position.
Just a note, the AI is better in the director's cut.
While we are on that note, the new items and the reworked boss fights in particular are what makes the director's cut a vastly superior version. In the original release, there wasn't really a reason to go stealth, as the boss fights were really badly designed. The director's cut offers us a way to defeat the bosses with stealth.
Didn't you also test the Wii U director's cut? Might be worth to take a look at, as the director's cut was originally supposed to be a Wii U exclusive.
Yeah, well, there are a few things that I need to address here. Starting with the cutscenes, that are at some rare occasions weirdly lagging. Then the controls, which are not customizable and feel out of place, as the developers didn't want to take a look at any other modern console shooter. That being said, it was impossible for me, even with auto-aiming, to have any kind of precise aiming. The loading times are probably 3 times as long, and the usually constant 30 FPS sometimes take a big dip, but nowhere near unplayable levels.
That sounds like a bad port.
Weirdly enough, the Wii U version has one edge above all the other versions of Human Revolution. It's by far the most immersive and the most fun to play as a stealth game, because running and gunning is basically impossible. There's just something magical about reading the literature of Human Revolution on the gamepad, or entering passwords and codes with your fingers just like you do in real life.
Is it better than the other version?
Ha! No. But if the gamepad would have customizable controls and would be PC compatible, then it would really boost the atmosphere of the game in general.
Aren't we forgetting something?
Oh right, the new conversation system.
I did like the visual novel approach, as it rewards you for keeping track of what's happening with these characters and what exactly they say.
What I didn't get though is the following. Here I've chosen the exact same dialogue, but it was like a 50-50 chance if the character likes it or not.
Speaking of 50-50 chance, there is a certain side quest.
Yes, it's time to talk about this. The side quest Cloak and Daggers is a heavily bugged quest since the very first release of the game, and it wasn't ever fixed. The entire problem lies in one guard not spawning properly, making the quest unfinishable, but PC users can alight again. Debug menu.
Speaking of side quests, why was there only the one side quest in Jensen's office and not more? He's the head of security in a big company. Surely there would be more going on. Even arbitrary things like settling beef between 2 co-workers would have been nice.
Let's talk about the musical department for a second.
The soundtrack is not as memorable or as good as in the first game, but it's a really good ambient soundtrack that didn't get
It's
old.
more than that. In my opinion, it's one of the best ambient soundtracks, period.
I think we've been talking about the flaws and pros in great detail so far. Can we just skip ahead to the final result?
Nah, but I can do a very quick summary of what's left. I encountered one corner I couldn't go around while stealthing, and there are some very few invisible walls that could hinder your experience while running and gunning. The AI sometimes doesn't care if you steal stuff. You can at times just walk past the consequences, literally. And the architecture is very weird at times, like rooms that don't have doors. What? Wait. That's actually already it. Neat.
Deus Ex Human Revolution is a good game as a standalone. It needed a little less rush to be a worthy prequel. As a fan of stealth to reach an objective, I didn't feel I was punished for doing a run and gun, which, I'll be honest, I did that whenever I got frustrated. But I will give credit to the takedown system. My first playthrough, I didn't find much enjoyment in the system, but after playing through some other games with similar systems, I found some enjoyment. The changes to the boss fights were a needed touch, but at the same time, could have been done much better in offering you a way to reach them without already being engaged in the boss fights themselves. In other words, the game could have used a little more playtesting and a little more polish. I'm giving the first Human Revolution release a 5, with the director's cut getting an 8 by comparison.
Deus Ex Human Revolution is a pretty damn good game, no matter how you try to twist it. Okay, yes, it's not as complex as the first Deus Ex, but it doesn't have to be, as it plays much more fluently, and the level design still offers a ton of ways to reach your objective. I have to say one thing, however. To get the ideal run and gun experience, play the first release of Human Revolution. The director's cut is the best option for a stealthy approach, but it also makes the run and gun experience way too easy with the added items and energy changes. The Wii U version is the most immersive, but has to deal with slowdowns and long loading times in addition to questionable controls. I'm giving the director's cut a 7, the first release a 6, and the Wii U version a 5. I personally think it will overall age as well as the first Deus Ex game.